Hey guys, today I would like to talk with you about The Rule of Wolves, a fantasy adventure novel by Leigh Bardugo. This book was released in 2021 and it is the second and the last book in the King of Scars duology, as well as the seventh book in the Grishaverse series. As per usual, I will start this video with a short synopsis of the book, then proceed to a non-spoiler review and wrap it all up with the spoilers. If you haven't read The Rule of Wolves yet, do not worry, I'll let you know when the spoilers begin, so you could click off this video. Lastly, if you are here, I just have to assume that you are familiar with the Grishaverse. And since there is no way to really talk about The Rule of Wolves without mentioning events that happened in the previous books, I need you to keep in mind that this whole video will include spoilers from the Shadow and Bone trilogy, from Six of Crows duology, and from King of Scars as well. If you haven't read any of those books yet, I highly recommend you to catch up on them before coming back to check out this video. Now, if I'm being honest, I found it rather difficult to write a synopsis for this book, mainly because there are just so many things happening all over the place, and every storyline includes some kind of a spoiler, that the only way to talk about the storyline spoiler-free is by staying rather shallow. But okay, let's give it a try. Just like the King of Scars, this book also follows Nikolai, Zoya, and Nina. Though once in a while we get to take a little break from the main trio and see what is happening with our once again alive Darkling and Mayukir Cat, the imposter shoe princess that we were introduced to in the first book of the duology. The main problem in this book is the unavoidable war that is about to break out at any time between Ravka and Fjarda. The tensions between these two countries have been running high since the very first book in the Grishaverse. The countries are at odds due to their individual beliefs when it comes to Grisha. While Fjarda sees it as their sacred mission to exterminate all the Grisha, Ravka is a country that gives them safety and sees them as an important part of their community. So on one side in Ravka we have Nikolai and Zoya, who are incredibly overwhelmed due to this impending war, as they do not have no resources nor allies needed in order to fight such a strong country as Fjarda. And on another side we have Nina in the heart of Fjarda, who continues to work as a spy, trying to infiltrate into the royal family of Fjarda and collect any information that would help Nikolai to stop the war, or at least give them an advantage that could lead to Ravka's victory. Now this time I am planning to keep my non-spoiler review extra short, as just like with the synopsis, I find it very difficult to talk about this book without spoiling the actual plot points. Overall, this book put me on an emotional roller coaster. It made me once more appreciate the warm feeling of familiar magical world that Leigh Bardugo created, yet it also gave me an anxiety every time I had to put the book aside and go back to real life, because I needed to know that my beloved characters would be fine. How could I just leave Nina surrounded by Fjardans, Zoya and Nikolai fighting a losing battle on all sides of Ravka's borders, or the Shadowfold expanding, and just go to work? I needed to stay in and read because I desperately needed a happily ever after. Instead of giving me that, this book broke my heart at least 3 times. Leigh Bardugo has a talent of adding emotional twists to her story while keeping the hope of the positive ending alive. In addition, this book also gives us a glimpse into the lives of the beloved characters of the previous books in the Grishaverse. Once more, we get to meet our crows, Kaz, Inej, Jesper, and Villain, as well as meet our Shadow and Bone lovebirds, Alina and Mal. And while yes, this is most definitely done as a fan service, for me personally, including them felt like a great way to connect the separate series and give the feeling to the reader of the Grishaverse world being authentic. Just because Six of Crows or Shadow and Bone characters are done with their own missions, it doesn't mean that they left the world completely. Having Rule of Wolves characters interact with them just felt realistic. And while I feel that the author could easily write a third book under the King of Scars duology just to dig deeper into the ending she gave us, I do honestly believe that it was the right ending. It wasn't something that I thought I needed when I started reading these books, but once I got it, I knew that everything felt right into their exact places. On this note, we will jump straight into the spoiler review, where we can discuss the book, the characters, and the events of the story much more openly. So if you haven't read Rule of Wolves yet, but are planning to do so, and now it's the perfect time for you to click off this video. As I have said many times before, I have a soft spot for the Grishaverse. I love Leigh Bardugo's writing style and I thoroughly enjoy the characters she brings to life. However, I do have to admit that this particular book had several weak spots that for me were difficult to ignore. So I thought that in this spoiler review we can quickly look at the good and at the bad that Rule of Wolves has to offer. So let's start from the bad. First of all, the antidote that the good guys acquired in order to protect the Grisha from being enslaved by Fjerdans almost felt too easy for me. I mean, we were first introduced to Yurdaparem back in the Six of Crows. This massive threat that could basically wipe out all Grisha from existence or turn them into mindless robots have followed us for almost 4 books. And now when the stakes are highest, we remove this absolutely terrifying weapon in a matter of few chapters. I guess I understand that the plate is already quite full. We do have Fjarda to fight with Rasmus and Jarl Brum, Vestravka, the Darkling, the Expanding Fold, the public opinion of Nikolai being the bastard, or having Darkling's demon inside of him. And yet I was still a bit disappointed that this particular plotline was somewhat dropped instead of explored to its fullest. Another thing that I wasn't that big of a fan of was the bringing back of the Darkling. Now, in my opinion, there is good fan service and bad fan service. Just in this book, bringing back Alina, Mal, and Six of Crows characters was great. Did they absolutely need it to be in this book for this book to make sense? Of course not, but yet they all still fit very well into the plot of the book. They showed up for short periods of time. We as the readers got the glimpse into the lives they're leading now. We got to take a minute to revel in their quiet happiness and we moved on. Do I still want a book that would bring back Inej and Cass for good? Yes, I absolutely do. But what I didn't feel like I needed more of was the Darkling. And that's not because I didn't enjoy him as a character in Shadow and Bone trilogy. I loved the Darkling. He's an interesting multi-dimensional villain with his own goals and motivations. But I truly believe that his story was wrapped up well in Shadow and Bone. Yes, it wasn't a happily ever after type of ending, but it was a fitting end for this character. It was a great example of how even the best of intentions can drive people to do bad things. In Rule of Wolves, the Darkling to me felt lost. He's not quite himself and he's not quite sure what he wants to do with this second chance he has been given. His actions are not well thought through and he changes his allegiance multiple times throughout the book in a blink of an eye. I guess we could get into a discussion on how his only true allegiance was always to Ravka, but to me he still felt lost. In my opinion, Leigh Bardugo just wanted to give him a redemption arc, but in order to do that, he could have just joined Nikolai and his forces as soon as he realized in how much of trouble Ravka is, instead of author pretending for the majority of the book that he will be one more threat the good guys will have to deal with. Another thing I was quite disappointed with is that Nina barely had any chance to use her powers in this book. Nina's powers are over the top amazing, and yet in this book she was mostly taking the back seat and letting others do the dirty work. Which I get it, she's supposed to be playing a role of a perfect and timid Fjardan girl. However, I did truly miss the badass Nina from the previous books. And lastly, maybe I'm just being a little bit nitpicky, but I was quite annoyed by the whole Hannah changing her appearance to Rasmus thing. Now don't get me wrong, I think it's a wonderful plot point. Once I read about Hannah being killed, my own heart stopped for a second. I just couldn't allow myself to believe that Lea Bardugo would do something so cruel to Nina again. Not after she finally somewhat moved on from Matthias and found happiness with someone else. The thing that annoyed me is how easy it was for Hannah to change her own and Rasmus' appearance so quickly under pressure, and do it so perfectly as well. Nina herself had to do it under the influence of Yurda Parem. And yes, maybe you'll say that Nina is not a great example. She was a heartrender and not a tailor when she did it. But then let's look at Genya. It took hours for her to make villain look like villain again in the Crooked Kingdom, as well as it took hours for her to make Isaac look like Nikolai in The King of Scars. And she still couldn't do it without the help of paints and such. And Genya has been doing it for years. She is known for being the best Grisha tailor there is, while Hannah only had some basic training for several months. So while it was a great plot twist overall, it also felt a little bit undeserved. I would even go ahead and claim it as being a bit of a Deus Ex Machina solution. But then again, these things that I have mentioned are mostly just my personal opinions and preferences. Overall, the book was good. It was interesting, it kept me on the edge of my seat, and it provided me with some of the major heartbreak. To be exact, my heart broke 3 times while reading this book. First, when I realized that David is actually dead. Second time when I thought that Hannah has died. And the third time when Nikolai told Zoya how he feels and that he would marry her if he could, and Zoya told him no. So let's talk a little bit more about the couples in this book. David and Genya hands down has been the most wonderful, the most stable, and the least problematic couple in the whole Grishaverse. And to this day, I honestly do not know why Lea Bardugo felt the need to kill David. I guess she just likes to see us suffer. Overall, the death of David didn't have a big influence on the general plot of the book. Yes, killing one of the main characters raised the stakes of the whole situation, but with everything else going on, it felt like his death was somewhat brushed off under the rug by everyone else except Genya herself. And I'm not okay with that. David is an amazing character. He is smart and dedicated. He has a strong moral compass. He was a wonderful asset to Ravka. He was a loyal friend, loving boyfriend, and he would have been an excellent husband if given a proper chance. I found the whole storyline concerning the wedding to be awesome. Lea Bardugo managed to fool me so well. I was dreading this wedding, being so very sure that it's Nikolai who's getting married out of obligation. And when the very last moment I realized that we are actually getting the wedding of Genya and David, I couldn't be happier for them. And the whole wedding that started so wonderfully just had to end with such a tragic event. I honestly feel devastated for Genya. Since the very first book in the Grishaverse, we knew that Genya only has eyes for David. And her life has been far from simple. She was practically sold to the royalty of Ravka. She was being sexually abused by the king, while at the same time being psychologically abused by the queen. She was looked down at by her peers, she was permanently scarred by the Darkling, and now the love of her life is being taken away from her on their wedding day. How can one person survive this much heartache? Then we have Nina and Hannah, and let me tell this right away. While I'm happy these two wonderful ladies found each other, I will forever stay a fan of Nina and Matthias. I understand that there is no point in comparing these two couples, as Matthias is dead and Hannah is here giving Nina all the things that Matthias couldn't. But in my opinion, Matthias and Nina, they just clicked. They were so great together. They challenged one another. They helped each other grow. They loved each other despite their differences. Nina and Hannah are somewhat the same character. They both are troublemakers, ready to fight against unjust regime. They might understand each other so very well and fight as a team for their ultimate goal. But I have to admit that I miss the dynamic that Matthias and Nina had. That being said, I was very happy to see happiness coming back to Nina's world. As well as I'm happy that Nina's story wrapped up with her being in the position where she can work to achieve some actual change for Grisha everywhere. And lastly, we have Nikolai and Zoya. I think that their relationship is a perfect slow burn love story. The whole storyline of them starting off as strangers, then growing into colleagues that respect each other, and in time slowly learning to trust one another with their personal difficulties, to lean on each other and to keep each other marching. It was wonderful to read about so much respect for one another turning into love, and both of them understanding this overall severity of their situation made me respect them so much as individuals. Nikolai has no doubts about his feelings for Zoya, yet he knows that he's the king of Ravka, and he knows that what the country needs will always come before his personal needs. He might want Zoya, but Ravka needs allies. As well as Ravka is not ready for Grisha queen that will never get old and could basically rule forever. And Zoya's loyalty to Ravka is just as unbreakable as Nikolai's is. Even if we put aside the personal doubts of Zoya believing that she was not built for love but for war instead, we know that even if she would not have this twisted perception of her purpose in life, she would still never risk acting on her feelings towards Nikolai, as she knows how that could negatively affect Ravka. And Ravka is what Zoya lives for. The fact that they both put their sense of duty and their ideals of the greater good above their personal needs speaks volumes about their characters. And yet at the same time, I was so very glad to see them ending up together. As I have said in my non-spoiler review, when I started reading this book, I did not know that I needed Zoya to become the queen of Ravka. Not even for a second I thought about this being a possibility. And yet when Nikolai nominated her for the position, it felt like all the pieces finally fell into their places. Well, of course Zoya should be the queen of Ravka. Who else? She is the intelligent and loyal badass who proved over and over again her devotion to the country. Overall, the ending of the duology felt great to me. It gave me that happy ending feeling, that calm that comes only after a major storm passes. Many awful things might have happened during the book. Great people might have died, but right now we finally got a moment to stop, breathe, and hope for the better future. But that's only my opinion. What about yours?